smart. And we lived in a basement apartment in Harley Street, and I would bolster up my bed every night, and I would go out of the window. Very convenient to live in a basement apartment when you're a teenager. And I would be out the window, and I would go to all the jazz clubs. I would go to, Tubby Hayes Club and this club and that club, and just hang out and listen to music, listen to jazz.
Because I understand your father was a theatrical agent, so I guess would you have had famous, amazing people come to the house as well?
We did have that. So we were very different from the other girls at my school. Our family was very different from other families. They would be going to the country for the weekend with the dogs and the station wagon, and off they would go, whereas we were like a bohemian family. My father was the theatrical agent. Famous people were always coming through our house. My mother was very much a stay-at-home mother, but she stayed at home doing I don't know what, really, because they didn't take that much interest in what I was doing. I could get away with anything because I had an older sister who, of course, went to Hollywood and became an actress and became successful. And then I had a younger brother who they doted upon because they really wanted a boy. And so there I was right in the middle, like, oh, okay, well, we can ignore her. She can let her get on with whatever she wants to get on with. And what I got on with was being a bad girl. Not that bad.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean by going out of my window, by playing truant all the time, by just living my own life. So I became street smart at a very early age. And also, I was very observant. I would observe my father, who was very chauvinistic, and his male friends, always putting women down. He kept by his bed a copy of Lady Chatterley's Lover in a brown paper wrapper, and that was the only book in the house. And then, of course, until I started reading, and I would run out and buy everything by Enid Blyton, and I would buy everything, I moved on from Enid Blyton to Dickens, and then I loved our Harold Robbins, and I was an avid reader, so I had bookcases and bookcases full of books, and I was much more interested in reading than spending time with any of the girls at school who I didn't get along with.
And so what precipitated you being kicked out of school?
Well, this whole thing with playing truant, I mean, and the combination of that and the smoking and the waving at the resident flasher, they were all combined. And then, they called up my mother and said, did you write these notes? Because there was a series of notes that I'd forged. And also, I pretended to be American. I loved America. And I pretended that my father was in the CIA and that we were only here on a short while. And, I made up all these stories. So they felt I was too imaginative for the school. The school had a motto, which is, our children are the corners of the polished temple. It was a Christian school, and I just didn't fit in.
So you had no particular friends from that era, people that you later stayed friends with? You were just a complete outcast?
Absolutely not. And it's so interesting when I look at my own daughters. I have 3 daughters, and they all have friends from their childhood, and they've all remained fast friends. And I didn't have any, no. My friends were Enid Blyton and The Faraway Tree and The Famous Five and the books. My friends were all imaginary friends. I did have one friend. She was 2 years older than me, and she was American. And she arrived at the school, and she was a terrible influence, but I loved her. And we would go out, and she would play truant with me, and we would go to the movies together, and we would get into trouble together.
I've read that you had an affair with Marlon Brando when you were 17 and he was 29. Is that right?
It is kind of right, but I'm going to write about it in my autobiography when I get around to finishing it, which is going to be called Reform School or Hollywood, which is what my parents actually said to me. Because I was a punk before punks existed. And I was one of those kids that would walk down the street like in an outlandish outfit, and then people would stare at me, and I think I came up with that phrase, what are you staring at? Why don't you take a picture? It'll last longer. And so they were so annoyed with me, my parents, that they actually, when I was thrown out of school, burnt my clothes and then sent me off to Hollywood, where my sister was making movies with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward and Harry Belafonte. And she met me at the airport and said, okay, learn to drive. Here's the keys to my car. Here's the apartment. Here's a list of people. If you get in any trouble, I'm off on location. Goodbye. And I loved that. In fact, I wrote about the people that I met because we lived in an apartment. Her apartment was like Melrose Place. So, there were like would-be directors, would-be actors. Everybody was pumping gas and parking cars and waitressing, and it was a fabulous environment.
So was it your experience at the time that everyone was somehow on the make?
I guess so, in a way. They all wanted to be something. They wanted to make something of themselves. And I wanted to be a writer more than anything. And I did a little bit of modeling, I did a little bit of acting. None of it I wanted to do, but I wanted to make some money too. And all I wanted to do was write books. But everybody said, you can't do that. You've got to go to college, you've got to finish your education, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And my message to everybody out there is follow your dream, because I believe so strongly that so many women don't follow their dream. They think, oh, some guy's going to come along and we'll get married and we'll live happily ever after and we'll have kids. And it doesn't happen that way. Women have to have something for themselves. They have to have something, even if it's making cupcakes, they have to have something they can do to make a living if it all doesn't work out.
Did you always feel that way right from the time you were a teenager?
I think I did. Yes, I think I did. I got married at a very early age to a fantastic man. And when I came back from America, he was great, but he turned out to be hooked on drugs, which was a real education because I didn't know anything about drugs. And he was hooked on methadone, which today is called speed. And at that time, he was a manic depressive. So he was bipolar, but at that time it was not called bipolar. It was called psychiatric problems. And so he would be constantly being put in psychiatric wards, which I would have to go and visit in my little 60s miniskirts, walking through a psychiatric ward of maniacs, which was kind of quite an education.
So when you met and married him, you didn't know about this condition?
No, I didn't know about this. And the interesting thing is, he was seeing a psychiatrist for his depression. And the psychiatrist put him on methadone. And then the psychiatrist went on vacation. And he said to him, oh, I'm going to be on vacation for 3 weeks. I'm going to show you how to shoot up yourself. I mean, really? And so he did, and that's how he became an addict. And there was no saving him. I tried and I tried and I tried, but there was no saving him. I can remember, as a 20-year-old going into a doctor's office and screaming at him in front of the whole waiting room full of people, if you dare to give my husband drugs again, I'm going to take you to the police, I'm going to tell on you, I'm going to do all these things. But it was hopeless, it was a really hopeless situation.
How did he die?
He was found in his car shortly after I married my second husband in a park, and he'd obviously overdosed. And the police came to my front door because that was the only name that he had on him.
How did you feel when you heard about that?
Well, I was terribly upset, but I was also not surprised because I knew it would happen. Because during our marriage, he made several attempts at killing himself. So I would come home and he would be lying on the bed and he would have a notice on it. I'm taking all these, and then I would have to call the ambulance and they would have to come and pump his stomach and take him. And so it was a roller coaster ride, He would bury his drugs. He would dig up, I'll always remember this, he would dig up the tile in the bathroom behind the loo to bury the drugs and then put the tile back so that I wouldn't find them, because I was constantly trying to find them, and drug addicts are constantly denying that they're doing anything.
So I always imagine when I hear about the stories
Yes.
about you that you have this vast experience with different types of men, different types of humanity, if you like.
Yeah.
When you went to meet your second husband, was it difficult for you to be vulnerable again?
He was a very interesting man, my second husband. He's the one that encouraged me to be published, to write. He was 20 years older than me and American. And he came to London and he owned this fantastic nightclub called the Ad Lib. And I was actually going out with the guy who ran the club for him. And so he would say to me, well, we've got to go out one night. And I would say, no, I'm really seeing somebody. And then one night he said, there's a Diana Ross concert and you like Diana Ross. Can we go to the concert? And I go, oh, okay, I'll go to the concert with you. And it was a Monday night. I'll never forget it. And then he says to me, which is quite romantic, he goes, okay, we'll go to the concert and then Monday nights are mine. And then gradually every day of the week became his. And I didn't think I would marry him because he wasn't my type. He was much older than me. He was very settled. He was, and he kind of persuaded me in a way. And I didn't think I would marry him. But then I knew he hated to fly. He was scared of flying. And I said, okay, I'll marry you in California. And off I flew thinking, oh, he'll never follow me. And he followed me to California and we got married.
So it's interesting because he doesn't sound, his name was Oscar Lerman, I
Yes,
believe.
yes.
He doesn't sound like the kind of character or the love affair that you would write about in one of your
Like
books.
one of my bad boys. Yeah. No, he wasn't one of my bad boys. He was one of my good boys. I mean, he's the one that first said, "What do you do? Are you a model? Are you an actress?" And I go, "No, no, I'm a writer." And he said, "What have you written?" And I said, "Well, I've written a lot of things, but I've never finished anything." And I showed him the manuscript of my first book, which was The World is Full of Married Men. And he came back the next day, he'd read it, and he said, "You know, this is a fabulous story. You tell a fabulous story. You've got to finish this." And I said, I've got a great idea. I'm going on to another book now. He said, "No, no, 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 you don't understand. You have to finish this." And so I had friends who lived in Montauk, just outside of New York, and I called them up and I said, "Can I come and stay for a couple of months?" And they go, "Yeah, sure." And so I went to stay with them. And because being English, we love to sit in the sun. And so I said to myself, "Okay, I'm going to write 10 pages a day until I am allowed to sit in the sun." And that's how I finished the book.
And The World is Full of Married Men, I believe that was the one that was banned in Australia, wasn't it?
It was banned in Australia. My publisher said to me, it was my first book, and he said, "You know, Jackie," he said, "you've got to take out all the four-letter words." He said, "This is 1968. He said, "You know, women don't use words like that in books." And I said, "Well, I do." And he goes, "No, no, no. You have to take out all the four-letter words because otherwise we'll be banned in Australia." And we were banned in Australia anyway, and we were banned in Boston, and we were banned in South Africa. We were banned across the world practically. And it was interesting because there wasn't a four-letter word in the book, but the book took the double standard and bashed it on its head, you know, because I was very much for equality of women, and especially sexual equality, because I didn't see it in my own household, the house where I lived with my parents, because my father was such a chauvinist. He was a lovely man, very popular, but he was also a chauvinist.
So let's talk a bit about your writing now. That first book, you said
Yes.
your husband had to encourage you because you hadn't finished it. Have you ever had difficulty finishing a book since then?
Never. I absolutely love what I do. Confessions of a Wild Child is my 30th book, and I never get writer's block. What I do get is getting to the desk block, because sometimes you go, "Oh, yeah, I've got to write today, but, you know, first I must take the dogs for a long walk, and then should I clear out the fridge? There's so much stuff in there on the wrong dates," and, you know, little idle things like that. And then once I get to my desk, I never stop.
I understand that you write in longhand. How long does it take you to finish a book?
It's a long process. It takes me about 9 months because I write very long books. But Confessions of a Wild Child is half the length of my normal books, and it took me about 4.5 months, and I loved writing it because I wrote it in the first person as Lucky Santangelo, my favorite character that I've written about in many books and 2 miniseries, which I wrote and produced. And so it was like this old friend, and I was 15 again, and I was writing about this kid who was learning about life and learning about men and learning about sex and learning about everything, and at war with her father because he wanted to keep her a prisoner. Not a prisoner, but he wanted to protect her because she discovered her mother's dead body floating in the family swimming pool when she was 5. And after that, he wanted to protect his children. He didn't want them to be out in the world. And it wasn't until she was 15 that he let her loose. And he said, "I'm sending you to this wonderful school in Switzerland. It'll be great for you." And then suddenly, you know, she had freedom.
It's an incredible story, and I love the way that at the beginning of the book you kind of write a letter to the readers, just a short
Yes.
letter.
Yes.
Is that, when you do that, are you thinking of your reader as a particular person? Do you ever think of it that way, or a certain collection of people?
You know, I have such a diverse group of readers. A lot of men read me. I have a very big gay following. I have a very big black following. I have a lot of mothers, daughters, and grandmas, 3 generations, who love reading me and pass my books down. And so I don't see one particular person. I just see the overall reader because I write about all ages, all colors, all sexual orientation. And I know that my readers are so loyal and so great to me. I mean, I'm on Twitter, which is Jackie J. Collins, and then I have a website. And on my website, I have a little section where they can ask for an autograph photo, which I will personalize for them. I call it my homework because every weekend I'm sitting there writing out these things. But they send me the most wonderful messages, and so it's worth it. And I think, you know, can I give back in this way? Because most people will charge for it. You know, they'll say, well, you've got to send postage and you've got to do this. But I don't, because I remember when I was a kid growing up in London, I would send fan letters to Rock Hudson and Tony Curtis, and I would wait for that postman to come and see if somebody had answered me and sent me an autographed picture, and it was a thrill. So I love doing that back, and I feel that I know the fans really well. And because of social media, I do know them really well. So it's not one particular person, it's just a sort of array of different faces and different ages and different colours and different sexes.
So you like to stay in touch with people, you
Yeah.
like to be connected to your audience.
Very much so, yes.
And have you ever found the digital divide an annoying one? Does it ever sort of prey on you in any way?
No, because I've been on Twitter for about 2.5 years, and I've only ever blocked 4 people. And I think that's saying something, because I have friends, movie star friends, who will block 10 people a day, you know. But it's nice that I get mostly a positive feedback. And a feedback is always great in life, you know. And I find the encouragement wonderful.
How do you get inspiration and stories to build that particular character of Lucky? Because you said to me that you're quite a solitary person.
Yeah.
You don't tend to go out a lot apart from your tours to meet your readership.
Well, I think I do go out, actually. I mean, I always say that I don't, but I do. I mean, I go out to my friends' houses, I go to screenings. I mean, I don't like going to big, fancy events unless I'm involved with it. You know, if it's a charity that I'm involved with, I will go to it, but I don't want to go just to be seen and be photographed. I don't like to do that. But I will, you know, I have a lot of friends that I see and go to their houses and stuff, so that's always fun.
Have you found ever that your work or being well known has been in any way a burden?
No, it never has. And I have friends who are famous, and it's a horrible burden for them because they cannot step outside without the paparazzi completely being all over them. And I managed to walk through this. I can go to the supermarket, people will come up to me and say, oh, yeah, we loved The Power Trip or Lucky, or we love that character. And they're very kind of nice about it. But my famous friends, I mean, I remember going to dinner one night with Elizabeth Hurley, and we walked out of the restaurant, and the paparazzi were literally crawling all over her car. They were on the hood of her car. I mean, it was impossible. And I said to her, well, what have you done? And she said, nothing. She said, I haven't worked in God knows how long. She said, I haven't done anything. She said, they've been following me all day. She said, I don't know what to do. And so, you know, it's not much fun being really famous like an actress or an actor. Then they surround themselves with all the entourage. I mean, I love writing about it, though, because I observe it so much, and it's so interesting. You see these kids come up and they get a big break, and all of a sudden they think they're a huge star, and they don't realize it's not going to last. And you see these television personalities that are on a show that's very successful, and then the show fails, and they don't understand that stardom is not something that lasts. It's something that you have to hold on to it and nurture it. Like people like Tom Hanks, people who've been around for a long time in the business, they know how to behave. They don't surround themselves with an entourage. They're friendly, they're nice, and they don't put up walls around themselves. But some of these new celebrities, they're just like surrounded by an entourage telling them they're the most wonderful thing in the world. And once you believe that, then the fall is about to come.
You've had the great joy of living into your 70s. Life has changed a lot in that time. At the moment, there's been a lot of debate about young girls and how they display their bodies, how magazines write about women and their bodies. Have you ever felt that, in a sense, where we are today, we've just gone too far in terms of allowing certain things to be aired, being too liberal with how we show our bodies? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, you know, it brings me to Miley Cyrus. I mean, she reminds me a little bit of Lucky because she's done it her way. And she gave a very interesting interview the other day where she said, look, she said, I'm doing something for my career. She said, I want my career to be different. She said, I don't want to listen to that old guy who sits up there in an office and then goes home to his mansion and his wife and kids. She said, I want to listen to the kids when I go to the clubs and I see what they're doing and I see what they want to listen to. And so she's following her own path. It might not be the absolute right path, but at least she's doing it for herself. And I really admire that. But I think there's a lot of girls out there, and my goddaughters will drag me out to clubs when they come into town, and we'll go into this club, and there'll be a girl with a skirt that looks like a belt and Louboutins that are 10 inches high, and she's totally drunk out of her mind, and will sleep with the first guy that looks at her. Those are the kind of girls that I would like to send a message to. Women have to do it for themselves. They have to have more respect for themselves. And when you see Lady Gaga striding around naked, you've got to say to yourself, no, that's not the greatest role model in the world for girls to follow. So they've got to be smart. They've got to be street smart, and they've got to be smart about themselves and smart about their sexuality.
How do they get the right message, though? Is it
They
through
read my
making
books.
mistakes? Apart from reading
No,
books.
I'm joking. I guess it has a lot to do with their parents. I mean, I have three daughters. My daughters are my best friends, and they're really they're very individual. One of them works with children. One of them has written her own book, which is up on Amazon. And the third one had a line of children's toys called Tiny Tilia, which she sold to Avon. So they've all had their own separate careers, and they're all very smart. And I like to think it's because as a parent, I was always there for them. And I think it's very important. You learn from your parents.
And what about drawing lines in the sand, so to speak? Is that something parents have to do too?
I think they do, yeah. I mean, I think there has to be a little bit of tough love. I mean, if you think your kid is on drugs, you have to do something about it. If you think your kid is out of control, you have to do something about it. But they can't get out of control and be on drugs if you're in their life all the time, because they can't get away with it.
In your life, you've had three, I think, quite strong relationships. What's your advice to women about monogamy, for example?
Well, I think, I very much believe in marriage. The late Louis Malle called me a raunchy moralist, and it's my favorite description of me because my books are very raunchy at times. Some of the characters are. But I'm also a moralist. I also believe very much in marriage and being faithful, which was one of the reasons I wrote The World is Full of Married Men, because married men, when I was a young kid, were hitting on me all the time. It was always the married men, you know. And so I think that you have to do everything you want to do and get off your chest when you're single, as long as you're careful. Just have a fantastic time and do everything you've ever dreamed about or want to do or follow your dream or whatever. And then when you get married, you're not trapped in a marriage thinking, what have I missed? Because you haven't missed anything. I had an extremely successful marriage to Oscar, even though he wasn't my type of man at all, but he turned out to be so. He was just a wonderful father and a wonderful influence in my life. And I would never be foolish enough to say that I never think he cheated on me, but I don't. And if he did, it would be goodbye. So I look at the Clintons and I say, you know, Hillary, why did you allow that to happen? Why did you just sit back and say, okay, Bill, yeah, that's fine? And I have no respect for women who do that.
So you don't respect Hillary Clinton?
I think she's an interesting woman, but I think she should have done something about Bill a lot sooner, maybe made some kind of public statement, but she didn't. She just allowed it to happen. And that's a shame because he allowed it to happen too. And he said, you know, I've not had sex with this woman. And then every kid in America thought that oral sex was not sex.
Do you think Hillary should have stayed with her husband?
I don't know. I don't know the dynamics of their marriage behind closed doors. There's always...
But once there's been an infidelity, if you like, should somebody stay with their partner?
It depends on the couple. It depends on the couple. I know that I wouldn't. I don't care what the circumstances were. I wouldn't. It just doesn't interest me. But as I said, I do believe in happy marriages because I'm sick and tired of seeing comedians who go, oh, he's got to go home to the old woman. It's such a drag. You know, they never sleep together and all of this. Yeah, it's possible to have great sex with a marriage going on at the same time.
You've had an incredible life with three men, I suppose, if we look at it that way. Do you ever feel that your happiness was cut short, particularly with Oscar?
No, because we had 23 years together. We had 23 fantastic years together. And as I say, he was much older than me, and unfortunately he got sick, and I nursed him through his illness. And he had the pleasure of seeing my career take off and be really successful. I gave him two wonderful children, and he adopted my child from the former marriage. And so I think I gave him the life that he really wanted. And so I never I never mourn somebody's death if they're older. I celebrate their life, and I celebrated his life. Yes, it was sad. Yes, it was difficult, but I celebrate his life. I have pictures of him all over my house. My children talk about him all the time, and you know, it's nice to celebrate somebody's life because we're all going to go at some time.
And I've just got one more question for you. What's the book that you'd like to write that you can't?
Well, I think I can do anything. Girls can do anything. That's my motto. I would like to finish my autobiography, which I have started, and I think I would write whatever I wanted to do, whatever I felt like.
Jackie Collins, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you for speaking with 1+1.
Thank you, Jane. I loved it.